Soccer Today is powered by Spin Media. From podcast to video production, visit spinmediadigitalsolutions.com and bring your content to the next level.
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Dwayne Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Wednesday, July 20th, 2022. I'm Kevin Laramie, flying solo today. Dwayne will be back next week as this is our last show of the week. A few days off to work on a couple of professional obligations, and we'll be back next week on Monday to have amazing coverage of the beautiful game in a big weekend. Today, we will talk about the Canadian Premier League's review. Midweek games in CanPL last night, 2 games. We'll break it down statistically. Do big game, big win for York United, and we'll break it down in a big defeat for FC Edmonton. But first, we'll invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on that subscribe and notification bell to be made aware whenever we upload a brand new podcast. If you're watching us via Twitter live, welcome to the show or welcome back to the show. And if you are listening to us via podcast, thank you. Podcasts available everywhere you get your favorite podcast. That would be Spotify, Google Play Store, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and other places also. Big show. Let's start right now with the results in the Canadian Premier League, as we had some games last weekend and last night in the CanPL. Let's look at the result in the biggest league in Canada. Cavalry Wanderers, that was last Thursday. Big win by Cavalry. York United and Pacific on last Friday was 4-2. So heading into last night, FC Edmonton was, of course, in the deep in trouble in the bottom of the standings. And the newsflash, they are still deep into trouble in the standings and into other places too financially. And other than Edmonton, but York United, big victory. And let's start with that victory because there's a narrative that it's starting to emerge out of York United. Let's look at that result. 1-0 for York. Yes, they did get a red card. Jordan Wilson got a red card at the 51st minute. They were able to hold on. But this is a robbery. Robbery at Spruce Meadows, Atco Field. They held on for the victory though. And look who scored the goal for York United. A player named Di Rosario scoring for a team in Toronto. We've seen that movie before. This is the prologue. This is the beginning of the movie starring Osas Di Rosario. And I apologize if I'm butchering the name. I don't have the pronunciation in front of me. This is his 6th goal of the season for York United. He's the 3rd best in the Canadian Premier League right now in the Golden Boot. Of course, William Akio of Valor FC was transferred earlier this week. He is now in the Scottish Premiership playing for Ross County, better known as the County. Good luck to William Akio joining the County. But big win for York on the road against the best team in the league. It's one of their few defeats this season for Cavalry. They're still top of the league, but York United, important 3 points. 3rd win of the season for the team in the GTA area, York United. The other game in the CanPL last night on a beautiful Tuesday across Canada. This one was in Hamilton. It was Forge versus FC Edmonton. Big win for Hamilton. When I say big win, I mean 5 goals. That's the first time in franchise history that they score 5 goals in one game. Big win, biggest margin of victory, I believe also in franchise history for Forge FC. This is another difficult result for FC Edmonton, and if you look at the numbers, they would explain them also. And we might actually go back to the numbers of Cavalry and York United because there's just a little bit of disparity. Just a little bit between Calgary and York on that one. But Hamilton played really well at home against Edmonton. 3 goals, a hat trick for Rubens Pacius, that now becomes part of the conversation for the Golden Boot race. So De Rosario has 6 and he's third. Pacius is second in the league with 7. Alejandro Diaz is top of the league with 10 as of today, July 20th. Abubakar Sissoko got a goal, and Kyle Becker got also a goal. Both those goals were scored in injury time of the first half. This was a big win. 66% possession for Hamilton, 34% for Edmonton. A passing accuracy that is 87% for Hamilton. Big number here. Very good. 14 shots, 6 on target. That is also very good. Now we'll travel back in time and go back to the Calgary and York game for 1 second, people. Just bear with me. I want to draw your attention to the possession numbers between Calgary and York United. 73% possession for Cavalry, 27% for York. And York won. It's highway robbery at Spruce Meadows. 18 shots, 5 on target. 13 corners for Cavalry, 0 for York United. That's called defending for dear life, absorbing the pressure, bending without breaking. Insert your own defensive cliche here. What a performance by Cavalry. But York United got the victory. This sport can be cruel sometimes, and this is just an example of how cruel it can be. If you're a Cavalry player heading into this weekend, you feel hard done by the midweek result. Which leads us to some changes in the standings. Let's look at the standings. Pacific FC now second, Atletico Ottawa third, Forge fourth. Yes, on top it's still Cavalry. 8 wins, 3 losses, and 4 defeats for Cavalry. Pacific is second with a record of 7-4-5. Atletico Ottawa is third with a record of 7 wins, 3 losses, and 4 defeats. Followed very closely by Forge, only 2 points behind. Forge FC, 7-4-2 the record. Now 4 points behind them. Valor FC 5th, the first spot outside a playoff position. Valor FC with 19 points after, and that would be 13 games played. HFX Wanderers 17 points, a record of 5-8-2. York United is 7th with 14 points, a record of 3-8-5, and dead last in the league, FC Edmonton with 10 points after 16 games played. They played more games than most of the teams in the CPL and still find themselves dead last with only 10 points. They have the same amount of points as they have defeat. That tells you all you need to know about the season Edmonton is having in the Canadian Premier League. And I feel bad for 2 players that I have high esteem for, and that would be Masta Kashai and Shimi Chom. Hopefully you're doing okay in these difficult times in Edmonton. Now we'll continue by looking at a couple of interesting games that are coming up in the Canadian Premier League. It's a busy week and weekend and even midweek, so let's start right now by looking at the schedule in the Canadian Premier League for the next few days. Here we go. And it starts tonight. There's a game in the Canadian Premier League, July 20th. That's tonight. TD Place, Ottawa, Atletico Ottawa versus Valor FC. 7 p.m. Eastern. It should be an enjoyable night in the nation's capital of Canada. Next game after that is Friday. We have Pacific FC versus Cavalry. A late night Friday. Late night in the Eastern Conference. In the Eastern time zone. It is, of course, in Victoria at Starlight Stadium. So it is 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern time. Beautiful game here against the top of the table versus the second. Cavalry on the road versus Pacific. Pacific with a victory will claim the top of the table for now. With a win, Cavalry would increase their lead at the top of the table. A classic 6-point game at Starlight Stadium. Starbright Pacific wants to reclaim the top of the Canadian Mountain this Friday. coming this weekend on Saturday, a doubleheader in the Canadian Premier League as we see HFX Wanderers. The Wanderers are struggling this season, not able to repeat their success from the last couple of years. They have had a big turnover in player over the last few years, and we're seeing the results on the field, unfortunately. And I hope the best. There's even cries for a change in the head coach position. I wouldn't go as far as doing anything drastic in Halifax for now. I have a lot of faith in the actual city, the beautiful grounds, the Wanderers grounds, of course, that they play in. It's always fun to watch. And this Saturday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, which means 2:30 Pacific. It will Pacific. Atlantic time. What am I talking about? My wife would be so mad at me for messing that up. She's from the Maritimes. So Halifax Wanderers versus FC Edmonton, 1:30 p.m. at Wanderers Ground. And the next game, just a little bit after, will be at Tim Hortons Field at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Forge FC versus Valor. Another interesting game in the Canadian Premier League, and I'm looking forward to watch both those games. Of course, it's going to be an amazing time. Now, in MLS, it will be a busy time, and after this short break, we will look at all the games being played in Major League Soccer this weekend with a close look at some of the things that could happen. Will this be the last game in MLS of Tati Castellanos? The rumor is that it's going to be the case. That and more after this short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kevin Laramie flying solo for the last show of the week here on Soccer Today. Sorry for the inconvenience. A little shorter week for this July, I guess, regular week. But we'll be back next week on Monday with a full review of the weekend in the Canadian Premier League and in Major League Soccer. It is quite a busy weekend in Major League Soccer. 14 games taking place, a full slate of games in MLS, as you can see on your screen. And we'll be back in a second as we take 1 minute at least to celebrate an amazing group of persons. Those people put their money where their love is. They support this show financially. Thank you to Pierre, Patrick, Martin, Jordan, Ian, Gonzalo, Glad, Dennis, Daniel, Sean, and my man, let's go boys, Blue Collar Dan, for the support on Patreon. You can join this elite group by going to patreon.com/2solitudes. And on top of being mentioned when you subscribe to the shout-out tier or the super shout-out tier, when you become a Patreon of the show, you'll get access to the Two Solitudes Soccer podcast, bonus content from here at Soccer Today, where the latest show talks about the Canadian soccer business controversy when it comes to Canada soccer. We look at all the angles and more on our Patreon page, available at patreon.com/2solitudes. Now, let's go back to the scores to come, the schedule in Major League Soccer for week 2022. It is already week 2022. Couple of narrative to talk about, and let's start with the first game of the week. NYCFC, defending champions, lost their manager this season. Still doing pretty well. Now they're going to lose the talisman. They're going to lose the Golden Boot leader in Major League Soccer. That is quite a shock. Let's look at the Golden Boot race, because Tati Castellanos, number 1 with 13 goals, about to leave for La Liga. According to Spanish language commentator Roberto Abramovich, friend of the show, he's been on the show before. The latest is that this is his farewell game this Saturday, 7 p.m. at Yankee Stadium. NYCFC versus Inter Miami, the last game to see Tati playing for City. Now, how will the fans take this? It's been a few names now, but if the results are there, maybe the fans will continue to support this blindly. We'll see how it evolves, how NYCFC continues to play without the talisman striker if this is his last match. We'll see, but this is the big rumor right now in Major League Soccer. And once again, according to Roberto Abramovich, Spanish language commentator for the games broadcasted on the radio for New York City FC, Tati on his way out, going to Girona in La Liga. Orlando Philly is another game that I'm really excited about. Orlando, without making a lot of waves or holding on in their performance in the standings, they're fifth, just behind Montreal. Yes, they have one more game played, 2 points back behind Montreal. So that's the angle why I'm excited for this. Also, can Philly get more points? Philly has 21 games played. This is their 22nd game, and this is a game that they will have in front of everybody else. If they get the win, they put the pressure on NYCFC and on teams like Montreal to follow suit with putting the points on the board. Because we all know, fans of the show, that points on the board are points in the pocket. And for that to be very good for Philly to keep pace even in the Supporter Shield conversation, because that is something that we need to keep in mind. Philly, with a win, continues in their epic adventure to keep touch of the top of the race for the Supporter Shield. LAFC top with 42 points, followed by Austin with 41. Philly has 39. They'll have one more game played, so this is important for Philly to get the win. Philly needs the win to continue to be considered elite in this league. It's a very, very elite club. Elite. I guess I'm going to say elite a lot. It's a select club of LAFC, Austin, and Philly in my mind. There's a gap, and NYCFC, and the gap includes the departure of Columbus, who's in the news this morning. Yeah. Columbus made a trade with DC United earlier today. The Columbus crew sends Miguel Berry to DC United. DC United sends $325,000 of GAM the other way. A trade that probably will benefit both. Miguel Berry was not seeing the playing time he thought he deserved, and he's going to have an opportunity to impress Wayne Rooney whenever Wayne Rooney debuts. If it's this weekend, great. Montreal's going to get a lot of good ratings. If it's not, it'll be another day. Not fully sure as of Wednesday, the recording of this show or the broadcasting of this show, if he has his working visa. Last time that I checked, one day ago, he did not have the work permit yet. But Columbus is at home against New England, and that is an important game for Columbus as they continue to impress. Cucho Hernandez has had a screamer of a debut, being integral of the success of late of Columbus, that are seeing the crew being part now of the top of the Eastern Conference. They are in a playoff position, 29 points in 20 games played. They're looking in front of them, not even behind, and that has a lot to do with the advent of Cucho and the performance of Luca Zelarayan. If you have to choose Zelarayan, and if you have him in your fantasy this weekend, it's going to be a good decision. You won't regret it. Let's go with Luca and Cucho for the fantasy. Continuing our breakdown here at week number 22 in Major League Soccer. Cincinnati against Nashville. Is Cincinnati for real? Was it a mirage? And is reality back in Cincinnati? They will be missing their best player, Luciano Acosta, for the second straight game as he's suspended for violent conduct towards an official. And Cincinnati has been, as of late, a bit on the downward spiral. Nashville needs to continue to keep pace with the top of the West. This is going to be a tough game for Cincinnati. And we'll see who's the real Cincinnati. Will the real FC Cincy please stand up? I repeat, Will the real Cincinnati please stand up? Yeah, we're going to have a problem here. Toronto, Charlotte. Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Toronto looking for a marker of performance. Will we see new blood starting playing? That's the question. I have a lot of anticipation in looking what Toronto is going to do. Let's take a second and look at Toronto's starting 11 against Montreal last weekend. A 3-4-3 that surprised a whole lot of players, but I think it's indicative of a formation he wants to play once Insigne and Bernardeschi are available. Okay, let's bear with me for a second. If you're watching us via podcast, listening to us via podcast, this might be a little abstract. So maybe go to the YouTube feed, the YouTube video, 21 minutes in on the dot, and you'll find the graphic I'm talking about. This is the lineup of TFC last game. So Jimenez, instead of being the left attacker here, I would slot him in the middle with Insigne to his left and Bernardeschi to the right instead of DeAndre Kerr. I would keep Kerr in the starting 11, drop Thompson, because I can't pronounce his freaking name, and put DeAndre Kerr instead. Now my big controversial point here, and what I think people don't really anticipate, but Michael Bradley on the bench. That's what I would do. And I go a little bit different here. I keep the 3-4-3, but I slot Jonathan Osorio instead of Michael Bradley. You need a player that will play a different role than Marc-Anthony Kaye next to each other. Why? And I'm going to bring that graphic back up if it's still available here, because there's a big difference between where those two players would play versus where Bradley and Marc-Anthony Kaye have played together. It's been a disappointment. How can you put two similar profile players next to each other? They find the same space. They find the same path to balls, which means they're stepping in each other's way. And that's a failure right now. It's been 2 games. You're going to say it's really early. Yeah, but the signs are there. You can't play the two together. And if I have to choose, I'm choosing the young one. I'm choosing the young money. I'm choosing the one that just came in, Marc-Anthony Kaye. Michael Bradley, I'm sorry. It's a difficult decision. As your father, I have to ask you to be on the bench to start games. And that's a difficult decision. And you slide in Jonathan Osorio instead of Michael Bradley, a more attack player that's going to find a bit more of the right middle and right side space. Thompson can be a bit more defensively responsible. And then McNaughton, O'Neal, Criscito, that's fine. No problem. Bono, Westbrook, no problem there. It could be whichever. Well, we'll see this weekend. That's the question. Well, we'll see it this weekend. I do believe Bernardeschi is going to feature late in the game. Will we see them start? I don't think we'll see both of those start, but can Insigne and Bernardeschi come in later in the game? Well, yes. I think that's what you're going to get. I think if you're going to Toronto this weekend, if you are going to see the Reds versus Nashville, you're going to get a couple Italians playing. I truly believe so. And if the weather's great, you should have an amazing evening by the lakeshore at BMO Field. DC United, Montreal's visit to Audi Field. Wayne Rooney, will he be on the sideline? That's the question. Someone I expect to be on the sideline is Miguel Berry, newly acquired by DC United. He will make his debut against Montreal. That's the whole point, to get playing time. It'll be fun to see Miguel Berry play for DC United. Montreal, can they put a second game together? Can they have another clean sheet? Having had their second clean sheet in MLS only last weekend, their first one since May 14th, they find themselves now with the possibility of getting another 3 points, another win on the road against a team that is desperate and bottom of the East. Houston, Minnesota. Interesting matchup in the Western Conference. Minnesota on the up and up with the amazing play of now MVP contender Emmanuel Reynoso. Over the last few weeks, he has propelled himself into the conversation of best player in MLS with his amazing performance for the Loons. Now, is that enough? That's the question. We'll see if it's enough for him and for the Loons to continue their great performance so far this season. They struggle out of the gate and they have to claw back the bridge. Well, they have to bridge the gap they created for themselves. And we'll see if they can do that this weekend. They're on the road. They're in Houston. It's going to be hot. It's a very difficult place to play, especially for a team that is northern type of climate, even though the summer is still very warm. But for Minnesota, it will be a difficult game, but I do feel they have a good shot at the result. Let's look at the standings right now in the Western Conference as we go into this weekend. Minnesota all the way to 4th. And if it wasn't for the bad beginning of the season, they might be one of the best teams in the league. It's crazy how things can turn really quickly in MLS. In Houston, well, they're not out of it. They're only 2 points out of a playoff spot as we speak. They do have one game played more than the Galaxy, who's 7th right now. So that's the question. Can Houston get a victory and push the Galaxy out of a playoff spot? The Galaxy do not have it easy. We'll get to their standings and their schedule. They're facing Atlanta at home, but Atlanta is a wounded dog, and a wounded dog is tough to beat. And they showed that they can get victories recently too. Let's continue our look at Major League Soccer's Week 22. Kansas City LAFC, interesting matchup. Looking forward to see if Kansas City is going to lose again. Kind of hoping for it at this point. LAFC and Gareth Bale expect a different schematic team out there. 4-3-3, yes, but Gareth Bale's going to start this one. And unfortunately, players like Arango, who deserves to play, is going to be on the bench and used as a substitute. You don't just pay and bring in a Gareth Bale to have him on the bench. You get him to play, and LAFC will probably use Gareth Bale once again on the road, maybe as a substitute, but I do believe we'll see Chiellini, Gareth Bale, and even the newly acquired couple players. I don't know how, but LAFC is getting all the players they want, and they're able to do it all legally, apparently. And if you say something else, they're going to fine you. Just ask Urs Tanner. All right, let's continue. Seattle, Colorado at 10 p.m. on Saturday is another amazing game that's going to take place in MLS, and we can also look at this game as a maybe the start of the rise of the Seattle. The Seattle. You know, that's a very good English, Kevin. The Seattle, you know, they've been struggling lately, and the Seattle, they need to get a couple victories, because if not, they're going to find themselves maybe in a bad spot. Yes, it's how you finish. But this is a different July. This is July 20th that you have more than half of the season gone already. And Seattle is not in the best position so far for a playoff spot. They are 9th with 26 points. They have one game in hand. But just making a playoff is not enough. You have to make playoff with momentum. And Seattle hasn't looked good recently, period. And they want to start to make a drastic change in how they play. Not drastic as you need to change, but you need consistency. And that's what we haven't seen with Seattle. Injuries and not having players there for most of the year is a big trouble. But Seattle needs to find ways. There's no excuses at the end of the season. And will this be the first out of 14? Will they be the first year that they don't make the playoffs? That is still a possibility. All right, let's continue. Vancouver Whitecaps, can they be a playoff team? If you want to be a playoff team, you have to win at home against teams that are out of conference and outside a playoff position. Chicago is one of the worst teams in the league. They're coming to BC Place off a victory last weekend. Yes, I think it was 2 wins in a row for Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. But Vancouver needs to feel good about themselves. And they need to be the one to beat Chicago. They need to put a marker down. Vancouver, will we see the 3-4-2-1 once again? Gauld or Cavallini or Brian White? Will we see the return of Pedro Vite? Those are all questions that I'm looking forward to. Would it be Cody Cropper? Will it be Isaac Boehmer? With an M. Boehmer. Nerwinski? A lot of tactical choices need to be done by Vanni Sartini ahead of this one. That's the lineup against Cincinnati that you see on your screen on YouTube if you're watching us live on Twitter also. you're seeing the graphics. But those are games that I'm looking forward to, and Vancouver, slowly but surely, are still in the playoff hunt, in the thick of it. They're in the thick of it. So good job. They were struggling and they had a bad beginning of the season. It's quite a turnaround in Vancouver. Yes, numbers would say to be careful and to be a little bit not that optimistic and put some damper on your optimism, because it is sometimes not replicable and expected goals and other metrics are against them more than often. But hey, you can't argue with results. Let's continue and finish our weekend preview. Salt Lake, Dallas at 10 p.m. Saturday, and the weekend finishes with Portland, San Jose at 10:30 on Sunday. Two games that are interesting. Austin, New York. Number 2 on one side and number 2 or 3 on the other side. There are two teams that are really playing really well this season. No expectations out of Austin, but they're living really above those expectations. And the Red Bulls are playing really well on the road with a type of soccer, a type of football that is interesting and will match up really well with Austin. This should be a fun game. A good offensive team, one of the best in the league, Austin, against a good defensive team, one of the best in the league in New York. Styles make fight. This is a fight I want to see. And the weekend finishes with LA Galaxy against Atlanta, another great matchup that I'm looking forward to watch. It's going to be a busy time and a busy weekend in Major League Soccer, and we'll be back on Monday to break it all down right here on Soccer Today, which you can subscribe to our YouTube page to help us in our journey to 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube. If you would like to subscribe to our premium show, you can do so at the patreon.com/2solitudes address, and there you can subscribe and become part of the shoutout tier, even the super shoutout tier or the regular tier, to get access to the Two Solitudes podcast. And if you want to subscribe to this show everywhere you get your podcasts, you can do so: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, and Google Podcasts, amongst others. And it was a pleasure to be with you today as we say goodbye and get ready for the next show, which will be Monday. Once again, no show Thursday and Friday. It is a long weekend here, and well, it's not literally a long weekend, but it will be, because we're taking 2 days off. And we'll be back on Monday here on Soccer Today. And until then, as always, I'm Cavalry. You can follow me everywhere you find your favorite Twitter. I guess you can find your favorite social media there at Cavalry. I'm also on Instagram, but I don't really do a whole lot of gramming. I don't do it for the gram, I guess. But you can follow me there too. And as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.